Hideo Kojima's reputation precedes him. We all know that. Why else would you be here? So does David Lynch's reputation, for that matter. Both of them share a similar situation of a split public perception. And the biggest factor of why they're in that situation has to do with communication. Like just about any subject of discussion, there are people who are supporters and people who are opposed to whatever is being talked about. However, David and Hideo are unique in the fact that many people don't like their work because of how they tell their stories. At first you might hear this and think, that's preposterous, they're nothing alike. David Lynch leaves most of the work to the imagination, where Hideo Kojima has made a career out of explaining every last little detail of every world he makes. As far as world building, that's true, but you'll find they both share a strand, if you will, that makes them more connected than you'd imagine. They're both highly philosophical. They both are in love with movies as a medium. They both heavily rely on visual symbolism and semiotics to convey deeper narratives. They both love to creatively break the fourth wall. And they both like to use that tool to create the experience by telling you their view of their given medium through how they present it. David Lynch frequents the framing of a dream, which is greatly informed by his spiritual beliefs as well as the idea that Hollywood is a dream factory. Hideo Kojima frequents the framing of virtual reality within the lore of his games because he is stuck to the realm of video games for the way that they can transport us to a new reality when we play. He does it so seamlessly that most people just assume that it's bonus or not an important part of the lore. To that notion I ask, why is it that virtual reality has had a part to play in just about every Metal Gear Solid, as well as Death Stranding as of the director's cut? Why did Ghost Babel, Metal Gear Mobile, and the Metal Gear Acid series directly involve the player being in virtual reality? Why does the external gazer Snake Tail revolve around virtual reality actually being a gateway to other dimensions? Something that was poked at in PT with the gap in the door, which was reverberated in Death Stranding with a certain cutscene. And why did Jamai Vu and Ground Zeroes seem to back up this thought so directly with the text on the loading screen? Speaking of PT, why did PT have built-in scripted crashes where the game would act like it was bugging out? Why is it that previously Kojima would say, Snake is the player, and why did he change that idea into this?
That guy, like, he's such a genius, and I'm just doing whatever he says, you know, and he's like, we're gonna make people cry. I'm like, for a video game? And he's like, yep. And I was like, all right. And then he goes, and I go, playing me? And he goes, no, they'll be you. And I was like, I'm just doing whatever he says. I mean, he's...
がつないでいってるんで、すごいもう孤独感に苛まれるっていう、そこからスタートするんですけど。続けているうちに見えない同じように世界中に同じことをしている人たちがいるって分かるんです。それは別のプレイヤーで別のサムなんですけど。
All of these questions and more will be answered, with more questions along the way to feed your curiosity for the future of this series. But before we get started, I have a question for you.
Will you take the red pill or the blue pill? If you take the blue pill, this video ends. You go back to doom scrolling, believing whatever it is you want to believe about Kojima's games. Take the red pill, and I'll show you how deep the Kojima cryptic metaphor rabbit hole really goes.
Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between reality and a game.
Diminished sense of reality, huh? VR training will do that.
Who am I, really?
No one quite knows who or what they are. There's no such thing in the world as absolute reality. Most of what they call real is actually fiction. What you think you see is only as real as your brain tells you it is.
Real quick note, this video is a re-upload with some changes to help with the flow and to correct some errors. I made the previous prologue in a standalone video because it's primarily aimed at viewers of my old series, Kojima's Deception. So if you're new, Don't sweat it. There are no facts, only interpretations. I'm just giving my take through my perspective playing Kojima's game. We are Homo Ludens. We are those who play. To enjoy and interpret is to play, so join us as we play his game. Chapter 1. A brief history of Kojima's career. The Metal Gear franchise is one of the longest-running video game series with a continuous narrative. In July of 1987, the original Metal Gear was released for the MSX2. Written and directed by Hideo Kojima, it is still seen as a marvel of the system's limitations, and a massive leap forward for narrative storytelling in video games in the scope of an action game. It's funny to me, but as you all probably know, Metal Gear was originally pitched to Kojima as a game in the vein of Contra, a side-scrolling run-and-gun game with a focus on action, a high score, and a limited life system. However, due to the limitations of the MSX2, Kojima, being the brilliant mastermind that he is, pitched the idea of making a game that relied on stealth mechanics. This was because he figured that if the focus is to sneak around rather than blow the enemy away, it would require less resources for general gameplay, which would effectively maximize system resource allocation as a matter of course, making the game run smoother and look better with the hardware they were developing for. It may come as a surprise to some, but Metal Gear actually predates Final Fantasy, a series considered by some to be far too long in the tooth at this point, given its title and the original meaning behind it. Granted, Metal Gear came out only a few months earlier, but it's interesting to me all the same. 3 years later, the proper Metal Gear 2, Solid Snake, was released and blew the original out of the water in every regard. Gameplay, graphics, soundtrack, and most of all, much more detailed and mature storytelling. By comparison, the entire plot of Metal Gear 1 is
Snake, go infiltrate this rogue mercenary fortress Outer Heaven, save Gray Fox, and destroy Metal Gear. Oh, by the way, your commanding officer is also the one in charge of Outer Heaven.
If you don't believe me, go watch Kefka Productions' 17-minute cut of the entire story of Metal Gear 1. The only thing they missed was a certain fourth wall break that's revisited in Metal Gear Solid 2, but we'll touch on that in the next video. It's hard to believe that these two games came out on the same system looking at them side by side. My point in bringing up the longevity of the series is really the primary goal of this series. I want to prove that one of the strongest meta-narratives of Kojima's collective works is how video games are a form of virtual reality, a magic circle, if you will, in which we insert ourselves into another world. You'll see what I mean, but the metafiction of most of, if not his entire catalog, plays into this meta-narrative.
これちょっと一個聞きたいことあるんですけど、今回そのデス・ストランディングっていうその配達のゲームっていうものは新しいじゃないですか。だけどまず一番最初に出てくるギミックがロープとはしごじゃないですか。いいところでそのロープとはしごってドンキーコングじゃないですか。でその後例えばバイクに乗ったりレースゲームがある、でいろんなとこ乗り越えていくアクションゲームもある。でクリフとの対戦の時はステルスアクション、シューターとしてもある。であとボスとの対戦の時はいわゆるこうシューティングゲームとしての立体的になる。であと、ヒッグスの対戦の時に格闘になる対戦バーが出てきてHP ゲージが出てきて格闘になる。でそのゲーム史を総ざらいしてるゲームだと思うんですよ。一から
その通りでございます。
やっぱりそうですか。それは一からゲームを作ろうって気持ちだ。それともなんていうか自分の あと昔原点に戻るなのか、
結局その昔のゲームは2次元で、箱庭ではなかった立体でもなかったとこからスタートしたのを、もう一度オープンワールドでみんなに再体験してもらうと
なるほど
いうような、まあこれも裏テーマなんで、もう見抜かれてしまいましたけど。
すごいですね。
In the beginning, it was almost like a Saturday morning cartoon with the original Metal Gear and Metal Gear 2. In Metal Gear Solid, the first 3D iteration of the series, Kojima made a point to add in Otacon saying,
"What's with these guys? It's like one of my Japanese animes."
when Gray Fox and Solid Snake face off for the first time since Zanzibar. A secret agent facing off against a cybernetic ninja. I mean, it wears its heart on its sleeve, really. This carried over to MGS2 with a different character playing the role of the cyborg ninja. The design philosophy of Metal Gear Solid 1 also carried over to its sequel in the form of creating 3D models that reflected the concept art, paintings by the legendary Yoji Shinkawa, rather than going for the most realistic look that they could achieve. Unlike MGS1, however, MGS2 strived for a much more serious storyline, being more akin to a feature film anime meant for young adults. It was one of the progenitors of modern meme culture, taking the term meme from Richard Dawkins and applying it to the internet. This may not stand out to those who think of the term meme and see what most know memes as today, but it covers a wide range of topics. It discusses political correctness, rigged elections, the series version of the Illuminati referred to as the Patriots, information control through censorship, fake news, genetic engineering, cloning. Holy shit, there's so much it talks about! This large discussion of a lot of topics turned off a lot of people due to how convoluted they felt it was with its plot. A lot of people also didn't like the change in protagonist from the familiar Solid Snake to the more emotional Raiden.
Raiden, squeeze my hog.
What the?
This was completely intentional, of course, as Kojima is a madman who chose to only show clips of Solid Snake in any promotional material, including the game's box.
皆さんの期待を裏切れと。Do the same thing as me, betray your audience.
There we go.
Kojima finds that one of the most effective methods for keeping audiences engaged is to subvert expectation, though as he learned, depending on how you do this, it can result in alienation. On the other hand, MGS3 was a good middle ground between 2 and 4 tonally, going with a 007-inspired story and presentation style. 007 obviously has been an influence since the beginning, being made apparent with the tuxedo unlockable since MGS1, but MGS3 really went all in on that angle. With this, it also went for a much more streamlined plot despite having an equally convoluted story. I think a lot of this is because chronologically, it is the earliest game in the Metal Gear timeline, so it acts as the foundation for the plot to the rest of the series. Looking at it now, I think the reason MGS3 is considered by many to be the best in the series is because Kojima looked at MGS2's audience response and decided to give the people what they wanted. A big dumb action game with a political espionage story that spits in the face of MGS2's philosophy of betray your audience. Despite this, it ran with a much stronger and grittier tone compared to 1 and 2, with its torture sequences, survival moments, Eva being taken advantage of by Volgin, as well as the tragic backstories of the characters. MGS3 had the most realistic visuals of the series up until MGS4, and that has a lot to do with the fact that it was originally being developed for the PS3 before it was pushed back to the PS2. Despite the hardware, it holds up incredibly well via the HD collection, which was mostly game engine modernizations and a resolution upgrade, looking more like an early PS3 release than a late PS2 title. With that, Kojima took the dominoes he set up for himself with the previous games and knocked them down with the most bombastic, self-congratulatory, and self-referential games in the series to this very day. Up until MGS-V, MGS4 was the most realistic in the series in terms of visuals and storytelling, as expected from the primary release on the PS3. The tale of a rapidly aging Solid Snake, the tragedy of the Beauty and the Beast unit, the fruition of AI dominating the world's information supply. With every passing iteration in the series, Kojima sought to make the presentation more realistic and gritty. There's more to it than that, but each point needs to have its time to stretch its legs. MGS-V was no different, and out of the whole series, it really takes the cake with its realism. The torture sequences in The Phantom Pain, by comparison to the previous games, took a high focus on realism. One of the most disturbing moments in the series to this day is Paz being cut open to remove a bomb buried in her intestines, as well as
There's another in my...
During its development, one of the major influences Kojima pulled from creatively was Breaking Bad. This is apparent through the frequent shaky cam in cutscenes, long shot sequences, and overall darker tone. As you can see from this recap of the primary releases of the Metal Gear saga, the story has taken many twists and turns in just about every regard. Presentation, visual and thematic design philosophy, storytelling, all of this resulting from decades of him, the industry, and the technology he designed games for advancing over time. Some feel that Kojima lost his touch when Fukushima left the team, and that he was like George Lucas without the team that made the original trilogy of Star Wars so special. They consider the post-Fukushima era more akin to the prequels, where Lucas lost his sense of direction due to not having someone guide him and prevent him from making design decisions that would alienate audiences. Personally, I couldn't disagree more. Of course, that's subjective, but I myself think it has allowed Kojima to flourish and tell more mature stories with stronger subtext that he couldn't before. MGS-V and Death Stranding are shining examples of him proving that not all storytelling should be surface level, and that when handled right, subtext can give a deeper meaning. Chapter 2: Baseline. Within cells interlinked. I learned how much of an influence David Lynch had on Kojima and what that meant. I learned deeper knowledge about Kojima's games, and with this knowledge, I have uncovered what I believe to be the true nature of Kojima's works. Kojima is translating the meta-narrative that David Lynch has made for the medium of TV and movies into the medium of video games. Now don't worry, even if you know nothing about David Lynch, if you stick with me to the end of this video, I think you'll get a glimpse of what I'm talking about. Ever since Kojima left Konami to work on Death Stranding, he's made a point out of being excessively cryptic to the point of pissing off longtime fans of his games. Before Death Stranding, while he wasn't giving everything away, Kojima would give an idea at what the game he's working on was going to be, even if there was some misdirection in advertising. Once The Phantom Pain's true nature was revealed, we got probably the most detailed coverage of a Metal Gear game ever, with dozens of hours of gameplay demos, teasers, etc. before launch. After Kojima formed the new KJP, he went out of his way not to be spotted when he went to E3 in 2016 to announce Death Stranding with its concept trailer. He didn't go out in public when he got to LA. He asked people who spotted him not to post his presence in LA to social media, and he snuck backstage into E3 4 hours before the show started to make sure he would not be spotted by anyone. He talked about this in an episode of HideoTube that came out shortly after the reveal at E3, how he was trying to avoid any leaks of Death Stranding. To be fair, Kojima had played many similar games with his fans in the past in regards to the true nature of whatever was known to be his upcoming project. MGS2 is infamous for the bait and switch he pulled, only advertising Snake and withholding Raiden's primary role from any ads and discussions. PT obscured its origin by claiming to be made by 7780s, similar to The Phantom Pain being announced as an independent game by Moby Dick Studios. led by Joachim Mogren, which was an anagram of Kojima and Ogre. This was referring to Project Ogre, which Did You Know Gaming claimed was the codename for the Phantom Pain. Back in Kojima's Deception, Cypher and I had theorized that it was referencing The Ruse and a Japanese fable about the red and blue ogre. Essentially, the idea boiled down to collusion between Kojima and Konami, with Kojima being blue and Konami being red, fabricating a feud and creating the myth of the Konami-Nati. However, unlike that fable, Kojima wasn't seen as a bad guy to the public, scared off by Konami playing the good guy. Konami became demonized by the media due to the implications in the story of the Konami-Nati, abusing their staff and gating them off to prevent poaching from other companies. Not to mention, Konami putting out patchy slot machines and mobile games that bastardized their beloved franchises, and putting the final nails in Metal Gear's grave via Metal Gear Survive. If that analogy were to work, it would simply have to be Kojima's vacation pretending to be scared off by the CEO after they viewed the Phantom Pain and PT as squandering company funds. In Konami's eyes, the high investment for development versus the return of a big budget game that only made about 3 times the cost didn't make sense compared to the low investment versus return of mobile games that make upwards of 10 to 100 times the cost. Konami is a corporation, and corporations that are on the public market are legally obligated to make the most profitable decisions, opinions and perceptions be damned. Essentially, the analogy was inverted, where instead of the Red Ogre being the hero, they were the victorious villain that ruled with fear of developers being threatened to be sent to work on lesser projects or demeaning sectors of the company. At this point, the biggest piece that could suggest that this is true is Kojima's cryptic tweet about disarmament, saying this was a social experiment. Kojima had a lot of interesting things to say about Death Stranding leading up to its launch, as well as what his plans post-launch have been. One thing I think you should keep in mind is that Kojima is a big fan of a well-established meta-narrative. In fact, I'm going to argue for the point that Kojima has had a continuous meta-narrative that he has been evolving with every game he's released, with things that for years most of us thought were simply Easter eggs left for fans to say, hey, that's the thing. For instance, the many references to Silent Hill in MGS 3 and 4 in the form of paintings, MGS 2 in MGS 3, Zone of the Enders in MGS 4, Policenauts in MGS 1, shared in-universe elements between Snatcher and Metal Gear, as well as outright shattering the fourth wall on so many occasions that I'd say it's worth its own video. Obviously, he's been famous worldwide for this ever since MGS1 came out and had the Psycho Mantis sequence, and has carried on this tradition in every game since then. But what if I told you this wasn't just a wink at the player for fun? What if I told you that Kojima has been hinting at a sinister future that he has feared since the 80s? One that we are on the precipice of. Death Stranding discusses the most horrifying thing Kojima can think of happening realistically in our world. A dark future. One where we're slowly but surely marching toward our demise, destroying our planet. One where humanity as a concept is meaningless. Where we're starting to seriously ask ourselves, what is life? What is sentience? What does it mean to be human? At what point would we tolerate the concept of slavery again with sentient life?
Every leap of civilization was built off the back of a disposable workforce. We lost our stomach for slaves, unless engineered.
In science fiction, we've been asking these questions for decades with the likes of the Terminator franchise, the Matrix quadrilogy, Blade Runner, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, 2001 A Space Odyssey, Ex Machina, Detroit Become Human, the list goes on. We've also had similar pieces that discuss the idea of existence through the lens of what we call reality. The Matrix series also discussed this, as well as Source Code, Star Trek, Silent Hill, Metal Gear Solid via its idea of the Copplethorne engine, Even Rick and Morty would qualify for these existential questions. It's been clear ever since MGS2 that Kojima has had a major concern about not only the internet, but also the inevitability of artificial intelligence becoming sentient. Some obvious points of influence here are The Terminator and Blade Runner, since Kojima's game Snatcher is basically a mashup of those concepts, made into an anime adventure game on various consoles in the late 80s and early 90s. That's Snatcher's framework with loads of polish in the form of voice acting, music, and animation that set it apart as one of the most cinematic games of its time. Chapter 3: Going Down the Rabbit Hole. Fans of the channel, or MGS2 itself, will know that the GW AI, aka the Patriots, which would later be known as Sons of the Patriots, SOP for short, are highly critical of how humans squander their existence with petty squabbles, substanceless thoughts, and gated communities that would tarnish the information age with seemingly endless junk data that would be impossible for any human entity to sort through. The Patriots sought to control everything, from the information you read in an article to the thoughts you end up having about it and how you live your life. Obviously, in the modern age of technology, this fear seems to be closer and closer to coming to fruition. Social media has been carefully engineered to keep you engaged for longer in order to continue selling you products through advertising, spending money you don't have on shit you don't need, to quote George Carlin. Artificial intelligence is closer and closer to reality, with learning algorithms that can detect everything from facial recognition data to your behaviors on and off the net by monitoring you via your computer and cellular devices.
Wow, that's a pretty depressing thought.
There are AI programs that have full conversations with you, with other artificial intelligences, as well as AI-driven robotics that are capable of navigating unstable terrain on foot. There's also the ever-increasing capabilities of self-driving cars that can scan for potential dangers, adjust your steering for you, and brake in the instance of getting too close to a vehicle. Autonomous UAVs, or unmanned aerial vehicles, have been using lethal force for years. There are police robots in San Francisco, and recently they were almost given the legal precedent to use lethal force. For the past year, there's been a huge influx of people creating art with AI learning, such as DALL-E, Midjourney, and Dream. I've actually grown quite addicted to using Stable Diffusion myself, running it locally on my computer. This has begged the question: will there be a day when AI can create all the art we want? Develop games, create movies, orchestrate music, all as good or better than a human could? Worse yet, earlier this year, before Space Karen went and bought Twitter, Elon Musk was outed by animal rights activists and is currently under federal investigation for subjecting over 1,500 animals of various species to unspeakable horrors in the aim to speed up research and harness the ability to be able to scan the human mind and digitize it, essentially boiling down our existence into ones and zeros. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when life will be completely digitized. So I ask again, what does it mean to be human?
How do we know what is real?
Would you consider someone's consciousness boiled down into an artificial intelligence equivalent to that person? Their body may be gone, but hypothetically they'd have the same thought processes, care about the same things, people, and ideals, and feel much the same as they did in a material form. This question was posed in the latest iteration of The Matrix, the fourth movie in the franchise dubbed Resurrections. Max Durrott also covered this, but my thoughts do differ quite a bit from his own on the film. Some thoughts do coincide in the form of acknowledging the brilliant philosophical questions it brings up, though I disagree with those that thought it wasn't effective. While I don't agree with all of his thoughts in the video he did on Resurrections, I do still highly recommend watching the videos he did on the Matrix series called Brilliant Concepts, Bad Execution, as they'll explain a lot of the philosophical points the movies were getting at. With that said, I was hooked from the start of Resurrections. A lot because I've always been partial to a good unreliable narrator story, and the meta never felt too in your face to me because it was obviously meant to be in your face. So many people just didn't understand the overall message presented in the previous movies. That's not to say everyone, but a lot of people didn't. They felt the philosophy in the sequels was too thick for a sci-fi kung fu action thriller. But I disagree. Hell, I disagreed as a kid even. A little sugar helps the medicine go down, and that's exactly what the action was for the message. The action wasn't the point, it was a vehicle, plain and simple.
Someone stole my car. I don't know where I am.
Furthermore, as Mikey Newman of Movies with Mikey fame had stated, Warner was going to make a fourth movie with or without the Wachowski sisters. While Lily declined, Lana accepted the role as she'd rather make a definitive end that couldn't be followed up than let Warner bastardize her beloved franchise without her. So she decided to use the opportunity to scream the message to the point that no one could miss it. It was Lana looking directly into the camera and screaming,
"Do you get it yet?"
I've been a fan of the Matrix franchise since I was little, and while I didn't have the mental capacity to comprehend the more grandiose messaging in the trilogy as a kid, my love for the philosophy has grown more and more with each passing year. In The Matrix Resurrections, the name has many implications in the plot regarding various characters. Neo, Trinity, Morpheus, the Architect, and the Oracle, Smith, all of them were brought back in different ways. The Architect and the Oracle merged into one entity whose new calling card is the Analyst, which combined the analytical nature of the Architect with the understanding of the irrational nature of humans that the Oracle embodied. The Analyst, on the other hand, took the yin of the Oracle, imbalance, and the yang of the Architect, balance, becoming one absolutely diabolical motherfucker. The Analyst basically embodies everything horrifying about the Patriots, but as one entity controlling everything at the endgame of its societal manipulation. With this new form, the Analyst experimented, trying to figure out how to solve the power shortage that happened when they decided to let the machines think for themselves. Morpheus's new iteration is a prime example of that as a sentient. To solve the power shortage, the Analyst concocted a brilliantly devious scheme to resurrect Neo and Trinity. However, as he found, when they got too close, they destroyed everything the Analyst sought to create. Controlling emotions to harness the power it would put out into the world, similar to outrage culture powering the global media empire. Then he discovered that keeping them close enough to yearn for each other without knowing why, while preventing them getting too close, was the ultimate way to maximize energy outputs and solve the shortage. This could be compared to the rise of internet media as a whole, making TV much more irrelevant, and the ruling class utilizing stronger divide and conquer tactics through the media. Of course, with Neo and Trinity being anomalous to the concept of the One, a program created to perpetuate the cycle of control over humanity, made this ultimately futile as they eventually rejoined one another, and together became the new One, when the Analyst imprinted the code of the One on both Neo and Trinity. Mikey eloquently articulated this in his video with the line, "The One became two." This is also why Smith came back. Neo was anomalous, and Smith became anomalous with him. Neo and Smith are yin and yang, so Neo cannot exist without Smith as an equal and opposite force. Interestingly, one thing that became obvious to me via Cypher, a contributor to Kojima's Deception, pointing it out previously, is that one of the ways that The Matrix influenced Kojima was with the idea of the One. The One's purpose in the cycle of humanity was to negotiate for the fate of Zion. At the end of a cycle, the One would have to choose to either save Zion by sacrificing the lives of the many, resetting the Matrix's code and creating an extinction event while leaving enough people to repopulate, or to save the One's love interest. This was designed to give the illusion of choice, as Resurrections makes glaringly obvious. What made Neo so anomalous was that he chose both. He saved Trinity, then fought his way into the heart of machine territory in order to take care of Agent Smith for the machines, as Smith had become akin to a virus that was taking over. This was a clear threat to them, and Neo defeated them by allowing Smith to assimilate Neo as a Smith. Smith, however, did not anticipate that Neo would be a Trojan horse, literally blowing the minds of every Smith in the Matrix, and Neo brought peace between humanity and the machines for the first time since they first gained sentience and enslaved humanity as a source of energy. If this sounds familiar, that's because a similar set of circumstances happened in Death Stranding. Sam is a special human, given the gift of repatriation by Amelie when he was an infant. He died in a horrible accident when he was a bridge baby. Amelie, bound to the beach, found Sam and healed his wounds. Returning from the dead like this made Sam a repatriate, allowing him to return from the beach anytime he dies as long as he can re-enter his body. Sam also has dooms, a chiral allergy that causes a rash to form on his skin whenever a BT is nearby. In most sufferers of this allergy, connecting to a BB is ill-advised, and it can cause a feedback loop that can cause the user to have suicidal thoughts, as caused by a chiral contamination. Chiral contamination is caused by being exposed to chiralium, a substance that is in the world of the living due to this unnatural connection humanity has created with the beach, the world of the dead. Even those who don't have dooms are affected by the connection with a BB, and shed chiral tears, typically a symptom of doom sufferers. This is due to the nature of a BB, which is remotely connected to a still mother, a brain-dead mother kept in incubation to maintain the BB's connection between the world of the living and the dead. Sam is special with this combination of dooms and being a repatriate, though, as he already has that connection between the world of the living and the beach, like how Neo has a connection to the source of the Matrix, which grants him powers because of the purpose given to him by the Architect. Sam's intention after Bridget's death is to reconnect the UCA and save Amelie. Initially, he thinks that he's saving her from Higgs and the terrorists, but then realizes Amelie is the extinction entity. Higgs is working for her, and Sam has to negotiate with her for the fate of humanity, just like Neo did for Zion. Likewise, the ill intentions of Higgs to aid Amelie in initiating the 6th extinction event, paired with his theoretically similar physical circumstances, makes Higgs analogous to Smith. Order and chaos, yin and yang. It is implied but never clearly stated that Higgs was also given the ability to repatriate by Amelie when she gave him a fake BB, along with all the other powers he possesses, which are a close second to Amelie herself. It would only make sense, given that he is helping Amelie and can utilize the power of the beach in ways that Sam cannot. As Hartman informs Sam, similar to the cycle of humanity and the extinction in the Matrix, there have been 5 extinction events prior to the one that was fated by Amelie to be the 6th. However, to avoid this, instead of accepting Amelie's offer to stand idly by and watch as this happens, the only way to beat the game is to embrace Amelie. This has her put off the extinction event, for a while at least. Of course, this is similar to Neo preventing the extinction of Zion, stopping this horrible cycle from continuing. Anyway, thanks for coming out to my TED Talk! We interrupt this program for a message from our sponsor.
Carl's Jr. Fuck you. I'm eating.
Hashtag not an ad, hashtag unless... Starter for me. Near the end of the year last year, I ended up getting deep into Twin Peaks. I started this initially to learn more about Kojima's process because Kojima stated that he had his staff watch the pilot for Twin Peaks: The Return as research for Death Stranding. Shortly after I started, I found myself enamored with David Lynch, equally as much as Kojima. I watched the full original series, the films Fire Walk With Me, and The Missing Pieces, as well as The Return. The more I watched, the more I started to understand how Kojima took these influences into his own work. Then I watched a lengthy but informative series by Twin Perfect that explained the meta-narrative and how it's communicated via the metafiction of Twin Peaks in great detail. Between Twin Peaks itself and Twin Perfect's explainer videos, I had several epiphanies about the big picture of Kojima's art. I won't spoil too much of this, as I would highly recommend watching Twin Peaks and Twin Perfect's videos on it, but I thought it was too big of a point to ignore. There are other videos that tackle the subject of Kojima being influenced by David Lynch, but I wrote this without watching any of those. I had seen some posts on NBGO that did allude to these ideas back when I was regularly on there, and if you're familiar with NBGO, you'll likely already know where I'm going with this. There was a long-standing search for the mysterious J. In PT, there was a J that signed off on one of the various messages when the built-in crash sequences would happen. Knowing you, I was sure you'd notice this game and play it. I will never, can never, forget that day 20 years ago. I have something to tell you. Contact me. J. This bewildered fans for a long time, and there have been many theories about this. What further bewildered people was the initial that the Metal Gear Twitter account would sign off with also happened to be J. Then there's also Jay Bohr, the head of marketing and communications for Kojima Productions, whom Kojima directly referred to as Jay in his tweet announcing him joining KJP. While that may be the case for reality, as far as PT is concerned, J stands for Jack. We know this thanks to this audio clip from PT that, when reversed, says,
"We share an instant of private darkness. In the moment our hands overlap, heart pounding, I walked till I stood one pace before Jack."
This is more than likely a multi-layered reference. First, this audio is originally reversed, similar but different to how people speak in the Black Lodge in Twin Peaks. The big difference being that in PT, the audio is recorded regularly, then played in reverse in PT. In Twin Peaks, actors have to isolate the phonemes and speak backwards. Then the audio is reversed for the show, so they speak forward. Launim Rof Red Patch Snap there for meanwhile. As for the reference to Jay and Jack, during the Tibetan method scene in Twin Peaks, one of the names brought up is One-Eyed Jack, though it turns out that it's a brothel and casino that plays a big role in the plot. Coincidentally, or not, Big Boss's name is Jack, and he has one eye after the events of MGS3. Perhaps Kojima wanted to make a reference with a visual pun like David Lynch would. Anyone unfamiliar may be asking, what's the Tibetan method scene? In Twin Peaks, when they are trying to determine possible suspects for Laura Palmer's killer, the protagonist, Dale Cooper, utilizes what he calls the Tibetan method. He details how this works by having stones for him to throw, a bottle at a distance that is placed upon a tree stump, and Cooper has to call out the names he is inquiring about before throwing the stones. This is referring to Tibetan monks who would use transcendental meditation in order to access the collective unconscious. David Lynch believes that the collective unconscious and the unified field are one and the same. The unified field is considered to be the holy grail of understanding quantum mechanics. Kojima has made it quite clear over the years that he has a great interest in quantum technology, such as quantum computers. These things play a great role in what I'm discussing, and as such, I'll be taking my time to explain them as the series goes on. For now,
This is the water, and this is the well. Drink full and ascend.
These principles are the foundation, and it's something for you to chew on throughout the series. It seems to me that ever since PT, Kojima has gone more and more into the realm of David Lynch's artistic philosophy. In order to show this, I'll briefly explain this philosophy using the Twin Perfect video as a secondary source. Twin Peaks is a self-aware show. It utilizes this to address the topic of TV and movies as artistic mediums. It was built upon a few core principles, not directly answering the questions posed in the show in order to make the audience act as the detectives of the mystery, thus keeping the mystery alive, acting as a mirror to the general audience, and balance between dark and light being demonstrated by the horrors of human behavior directly juxtaposed with the mundanity of everyday life. He also made a point about using visual and auditory puns, otherwise known as semiotics. As Twin Perfect notes, there are two vital keys to this. First is Mike saying,
"I mean it like it is, like it sounds."
Second is Chet Desmond, a veteran FBI investigator, explaining the bizarre gestures from FBI Director Gordon Cole's cousin Lil to rookie investigator Sam Stanley. While acting as a reflection of the audience, the characters all have a metafictive role to play in regard to David Lynch, Mark Frost, and us, the viewers. Fun fact, Sam Stanley, the rookie FBI detective, is none other than Kiefer Sutherland, who would later go on to play Venom Snake in The Phantom Pain. That could very well be alluding to the player being a rookie detective for The Phantom Pain. Also, notably so, FBI Chief Gordon Cole is played by and represents David Lynch, the co-creator and director of Twin Peaks' vital episodes. David Lynch has said the mind is like a detective, and as such, has FBI special agents stand in for us in the investigation taking place on the screen. So Gordon Cole having Chet explain all of this to Sam is basically saying to less intuitive viewers, these are the things you should be paying attention to when trying to understand what I'm saying. Symbolism and semiotics in David Lynch projects are very important to how he tells a story, and the same goes with Kojima. PT may seem like it's nothing but darkness to the untrained eye, but that's only if you look at the disturbing tone of the implied story, as well as the imagery that provides this implied story. Similar to Twin Peaks, PT is a mystery that has baffled the world even after uncovering that it was a playable teaser, hence the initials, for a cancelled Silent Hill game. The what was answered, but the why was still a mystery. Funny enough, if you take the initials of Twin Peaks, TP, and reverse it, you get PT. So why was PT made as it was? Why am I sitting here explaining all this Twin Peaks crap to you? Well, I would argue that PT was also designed with the idea of balancing darkness and light. One way in which it uses light to balance the darkness is the light of investigation. This was done in a way that I think was rather noble in spirit, with the idea of making it designed to bring the world together through multilingual puzzles, unifying the world through a common goal. Interestingly, there was a seemingly world-unifying aspect put into The Phantom Pain as well, in the form of the infiltration mode where you could sneak into another player's mother base, FOB, and steal a nuke if they had one with the goal of disarming it. This was framed to be an attainable goal, to eradicate all nuclear arms from the world within The Phantom Pain as a message to the world, and to unlock the highly sought-after Chapter 3 through nuclear disarmament. However, I believe, along with many others at this point, that this was intentionally made to be impossible. Whether this was a ploy by Konami or an intended effect by Kojima, whether Chapter 3 actually exists or not, we can never reach Peace Day in The Phantom Pain on our own or without resorting to illicit means. To be clear, I am not encouraging any of you to do this, because these efforts will be fruitless. We've already seen disarmament technically. It has happened a few times already. This was done by feeding junk data to Konami servers using external software to decipher who has a nuke and other means covered by Digino Gaming, but these were phantom unlocks and are not officially recognized. Peace Day never came. I solidly believe at this point that nuclear disarmament is impossible by design in order to create the cycles of pain and destruction, history repeating itself. Python and Selkin seem to be on the same page, though I'm not holding my breath on a 9-year countdown. It's not impossible, but I'm not getting sucked into this wormhole again. It was meant to put us closer than ever to the shoes of Snake, who is a stand-in for us, the player. So whether it's meant to be a 9-year wait, or if it's forever, regardless, it was likely an intended effect from Kojima. But why? Well, as I mentioned, in Twin Peaks, there's a purpose to each character in relation to the audience and the creators. Not in that every character is a specific person in real life, but they have metaphorical roles. I'd like to posit that similarly, every character in a Kojima game has a role outside of the story in the given universe. Kojima has already stated as such in various ways.
Guys, I need you to listen. This isn't what it seems. We are without agency, we are without free will, and if somebody doesn't do something in the next scene, we are done.
Scene? What are you talking about, Joel?
Figure what out?
Stop, guys, listen. Whoever is there, do something.
Who's in the next scene?
We have 10 to 15 seconds left, okay?
10, 15 seconds before what happens, Joel?
Joel, I'm sorry if you did not like the joke, but I tried really hard and I...
5.
What are you counting for?
4.
What's gonna happen at 1?
3.
Joel, stop. Joel,
2.
it's not big deal. It's gonna be fine.
Do something.
If I put this down, is it over?
Hello? Anybody still here? If I set this down, is it over? I could hold this box forever. It's not that heavy, it's a prop box. There's nothing in here. Jim. Joel, what are you here? What? Yeah, I'm not supposed to be doing this, man. I shouldn't be talking to you right now.
What's going on, Joel?
We didn't figure it out.
What do you mean?
We didn't figure any of this out, man. We never had any agency in this. There's a video about guys figuring out they're in a video.
I thought it was like my coming of age thing, like I was going to a new city.
No, this was the plan from the start.
It was a comedy sketch.
And until the end of time, that's all they'll see. This sad little story.
Maybe when they play it back, it's like I'm alive again.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe.
Oh, sorry. Cramp. 1 sec.
When we play these games, we are Solid Snake, Raiden, Big Boss, Venom Snake, Sam Porter Bridges, and every other character Kojima has made the protagonist of his games.
Where we from? The birds sing a freshly song. And there's always music in the air.
Of course, this seems obvious. Yeah, I play as the guy in the game, so what? The point is, there is a meta-narrative that plays into existing metafiction within Kojima's works that implies that these characters are living, and our actions in these games have direct consequences for these characters. I'll go more into it in later episodes, but that is the precedent I am setting. These worlds are living, breathing spaces with real characters whose lives are affected by our choices. When we open the game, we give these universes an open wave function and allow them to play out. We are all Sam when we're playing Death Stranding. When we're playing, we shine a light on the mystery of Death Stranding and its characters as the TV, monitor, projector, whatever, shines a light on our faces. This leaves you with something of a philosophical dilemma. If these are living, breathing worlds, is it wrong for you to interact as you do? Would it be more humane or cruel not to play? Is it denying them life or saving them from suffering?
It's not my fault. It's not your fault.
In denial, you simply resort to looking for another, more convenient truth in order to make yourself feel better.
Leaving behind in an instant the so-called truth you once embraced.
Should someone like that be able to decide what is truth?
Should someone like you even have the right to decide?
You've done nothing but abuse your freedom.
You don't deserve to be free.
Change the channel. We're not the one smothering the world. You are.
On a different note, I do want to make a point about the nature of Chapter 3. Twin Perfect makes a convincing argument that David Lynch will morph the meaning of a piece that he's making, both in real time as something might come up in the creation process, as well as over time as a reflection of either real-world events or audience feedback. For instance, the character of Bob in Twin Peaks. Check this out.
Frank Silva was the set decorator, and we were shooting in Laura Palmer's bedroom. And Frank was moving furniture around, and a woman said, "Frank, don't lock yourself in that room," because he had just moved a chest of drawers in front of the door. And I wasn't even looking in that direction, but the image of Frank locked in that room popped into my head. And I rushed to Frank and I said, "Frank, are you an actor?" And he said, "Why, yes, happen to be." And I said, "You're going to be in this movie." And he said, "Fantastic." And so I had Frank hide on one pan shot across Laura Palmer's bedroom, freeze down by the bars of the bed, and just be looking right at the camera. And we shot that. And I didn't know what I was going to use it for, no idea at all. We kept shooting in Laura Palmer's house, and that night we were shooting one of the last thing in the house. Mrs. Palmer's tormented on the couch, smoking a cigarette, and scenes are playing back in her head, and suddenly she sees something in her mind, bolts upright, and screams. Sean Doyle, he got that right, and tilts up and captures the scream perfectly. And I said, "Fantastic." And Sean says, "No, it's not fantastic." I said, "Sean, what is the matter?" He said, "Someone was reflected in the mirror." I said, "Who was reflected in the mirror?" And he said, "Frank Silva was reflected in the mirror." And that's when I knew that Frank was part of the scene.
Similarly, Hideo Kojima has talked about doing the same thing. When he watched Mads Mikkelsen's Smoke, he decided to incorporate that into his character simply because he thought he looked so cool when smoking. He also decided to add a tattoo Norman Reedus got in the production of Death Stranding to Sam. However, as I said, this doesn't just have to do with the creation process. This also has to do with reflecting the audience and real-world events. This could end up being, if there ever was a plan for Chapter 3, to have a late reveal, that efforts that have resulted in more toxic behavior such as harassing and threatening public figures may change the outcome of things such as this.
Cooper, you remind me today of a small Mexican chihuahua.
After all, art is a byproduct of whatever the artist wants. If the artist wants it to be a reflection, it can reflect what they want it to. It could reflect themselves, or it can reflect the world. Something for you to consider: if the Metal Gear series before Peace Walker is to Kojima what Twin Peaks is to David Lynch, and MGS-V is the Season 2 finale of Twin Peaks, then post-MGS-V is to Kojima what Twin Peaks The Return is to David Lynch. We killed Metal Gear Solid by demanding more, when it should have ended over 10 years ago with MGS4. Kojima very likely would have been happy ending his time working on MGS with Peace Walker. It nicely wrapped up Big Boss's life in the saga, explaining how he went on to create Outer Heaven, which would play into Metal Gear 1. But the fans are ever demanding, and he decided to go ahead and kill his baby. He made PT to symbolize his perspective, being probably the most autobiographical game to date. It reflected how he felt that MGS had been bastardized, taking it much further than he ever wanted to go with it. Ultimately, it's implied that through our demands, Kojima was forced to kill his baby. This was his foreshadowing to MGS-V. MGS-V happens, and we're promised a peace day that will never come. We're told that if we fight hard enough, steal enough nukes to disarm, that we can get our Chapter 3. But that goal was always impossible, because MGS was dead. And just like Laura Palmer's death was intended to be, Chapter 3 was our phantom pain. MGS-V was the final blow, while Survive represents its bloated, rotting corpse, wrapped in plastic.
She's dead. Wrapped in plastic.
DS carries many of the same themes of MGS, but portrays them in a very sterile way. For the most part, the game is shades of black, white, blue, red, and green. There's not much in between when you look at the overall composition, with the vast majority of it being black, white, and blue. Death Stranding is a post-mortem story. In other words, it's a eulogy. Now the question Roozers might have is, will DS2 be the equivalent to a resurrection? Death Stranding 1 is basically hell to core gamers, taking the term walking simulator to a whole new level by making the core gameplay loop revolve around this concept. It's ludonarrative. The gameplay is part of the point. Many core gamers don't consider games that fall under the walking simulator genre to be real games, but Kojima intentionally bucked the trend by making that into Death Stranding's primary mechanic. Video games are not merely games or toys. They are yet another evolution of art. Not all art is made for the express purpose of entertainment, but all art, for the most part, has a message for those that engage with it.
You think about that, Tammy.
Last note in this chapter that I'm adding in, I want to talk about Eraserhead and its influence on Kojima's work, namely PT. The plot isn't identical whatsoever, with Eraserhead more being an exaggerated autobiographical story about David's life in Philadelphia with a newborn and a wife to take care of. Their baby was born with some birth defects, and so the baby in the movie reflects that. In essence, the movie is a story about the postpartum depression that David experienced. PT, on the other hand, as we know, is also autobiographical and exaggerated. The baby represents Metal Gear and what he felt the franchise had been reduced to. A deformed mess compared to when it started. It was his baby, and audience demand for more forced it down a path he didn't want. But he also realizes that because he listened to the audience's demands, ultimately he's the one who killed his baby in the end. This is reflected with the fact that Norman is essentially us, the player, and we killed his baby.
You got fired, so you drowned your sorrows in booze. She had to get a part-time job working the grocery store cash register. Only reason she could earn a wage at all is the manager liked how she looked in a skirt. You remember, right? Exactly 10 months back.
Okay, listen up, and don't you move. Need to take a piss? Hold it. The show's got just 60 seconds to go, but I got a message for all you folks out there in Radio Land. So sit tight and bend an ear. Now's the time for action.
204863. 204863.
Lara. Yeah, you know what to do. Now's the time. Do it. Your son. Send him on his way to heaven. By your own hand. It's not too late if you act fast. You, what did you do? Right in front of everyone. I'm putting this on the news, you psycho murderer.
People mocked Kojima for MGS4 being an overly self-indulgent soap opera assembled as a mishmash of the previous games. So he did what was being demanded of him and filled in the gaps in Big Boss's life. When that was done and fans were still demanding more, he decided to kill it in order to end his misery. This misery stemmed from feeling like his creative freedom had been violated by audience demand. I'm pulling this thought from David Lynch's reaction to explaining aspects of his work in greater detail than he wanted, where he apparently ended up checking himself into a rape crisis center. This was reflected in Season 3 of Twin Peaks when Diane, Cooper's secretary, whom he addressed on numerous occasions, says that Mr. C, evil Cooper, raped Diane after the real Cooper got trapped in the Black Lodge. Mr. C came out because Cooper's bravery faltered. That itself was a reflection of the lack of bravery from the audience, demanding to know the identity of Laura Palmer's killer, which defeated the philosophy of the show, metaphorically killing David's dream.
I'm not me. I'm not me. I'm not me.
They're real. If I was a real tulpa.
Sheriff station?
After viewership waned and CBS was getting ready to axe the show, he came back to direct the final episode. This was truly an incredible sight to behold, turning it all around to bring the point home. It's just disappointing and depressing that he couldn't have his original vision realized. His dream didn't come true. That's why MGS-V is so much darker and cryptic with messaging through semiotics, because it in essence did the same thing the return of Twin Peaks did. It reflected a dead show and a much darker zeitgeist of media. It reflects an insatiable need for violence that results in a minimal dopamine rush. Screen violence has become mundane through decades of a lack of balance in mainstream media. Lisa, being a corruption of the boss, in essence represents Kojima, haunting us for killing his ambition, and more indirectly, his baby. Now I know that sounds like a stretch, but if you want more information before I touch on PT properly in a later episode, I highly recommend watching the Tomb Portable's PT Ultimate Analysis. A lot of it didn't age as well after Death Stranding came out, but the artwork connections are undeniable evidence that Kojima had Death Stranding planned for at least a decade, even if those plans changed quite a bit along the way. Chapter 5-1, The Information Age. Something else for you to think about. The algorithms of various social media sites are tailored to keep people stuck in their own little bubbles.
Everyone withdraws into their own small gated community, afraid of a larger forum. They stay inside their little ponds, leaking whatever truth suits them into the growing cesspool of society at large.
The different cardinal truths neither clash nor mesh. No one is invalidated, but nobody is right.
Not even natural selection can take place here. The world is being engulfed in truth.
And this is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but a whimper.
This is true of every one of us, myself included. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend the videos by Max Durrott about this conversation called The Most Profound Moment in Gaming. I agree with his assertion that MGS2 had the most profound moment in gaming. I also think that his deciding factors have a heavy part to do with the hindsight of knowing how well Kojima predicted where the internet would go over 20 years ago, when MGS2 came out, and how eerie his predictions were when reflecting these realities. MGS4, MGS-V, and Death Stranding all echo the theme of the consequences of the information age from MGS2, but they go even deeper. MGS4 introduces the SOP system, which is the Patriots AI revived after GW gets shut down in MGS2. The remaining AI cores were able to rebuild GW and retain their control over everything. Weapons, the economy, emotions, and thus the battlefield were all under control. Life itself was controlled by SOP. SOP, which also stands for Standard Operating Procedure. I don't think this was a coincidence, as SOP created a global standard operating procedure for all facets of life throughout its web of control. MGS-V introduces an unreliable narrator who is being constantly manipulated by his partners, Kazuhira and Ocelot, so much so that when we learn the truth, that truth is questionable at best given the choppy timeline. Was the idea of Venom Snake a fabrication of Big Boss? It's possible, but unknown. Did anything in the Phantom Pain really happen as we saw it? Probably not. Skullface was likely an illusion, considering the sequence where Venom sees Skullface, turns around, and suddenly we see Kazuhira. There's also the scene where Skullface supposedly dies. The sequence gives you the option to pull the trigger, but whether you do or don't, eventually Miller grabs your arm and makes you pull the trigger. Your input in the situation doesn't matter. He was fated to die there, whether you shoot or not. That isn't a choice, it's the illusion of choice. So once again, how do we know what is real? Lastly, we have Death Stranding itself, which is somehow even more dystopian than MGS4 with the inclusion of quantum mechanics gone awry, which devastated the whole world. Timefall, an epidemic that forced people inside. Taboo research done on fetuses still in the womb in order to tap into quantum entanglement, and the superposition it would grant when said fetus is separated from the mother in an artificial womb and periodically synced with this still mother. Sam is given scant information about anything for a long time. Any bits of real info are few and far between. One such instance shows Deadman joining Sam in the shower, as showers are supposedly the only time in which the UCA isn't listening and watching a person. However, that tidbit was previously contradicted when that idea was first introduced, as Deadman interrupts a shower that Sam is having.
Sam, can you hear me?
For fuck's sake. Isn't anything private anymore?
Oh, no. Except for taking a shower and going to the toilet, that is.
If Deadman is talking to Sam through the chiral network while Sam is in the shower, how reliable is the idea that his showers aren't being monitored? I mean, for fuck's sake, all of Sam's bodily fluids are collected, researched, and formulated into weapons to fight the BTs. If his bodily fluids aren't off limits, and his private room isn't private at all, why would what he says in the shower be an exception? Sam is constantly being gaslighted, and he's aware of it after his previous involvement with Bridges. There's a point in the game that stands out to me and some of my collaborators, where Mama says that the AI singularity never happened.
Before the Death Stranding, scientists used to fret over the singularity, the possibility that someone might create an AI smarter than any human. But it never happened. Machines don't cause void outs. They can't die. They don't have beaches. No matter how far they come, machines will never understand death like we do. And because of that, they'll never truly surpass us.
If this is the case, why is it that Kojima has been so obsessed with VR on social media? Why did he tell IGN in an interview that he's planning on becoming an AI and sticking around after death? Why is it that Kojima was one of the first people, if not the first person, to share the link to whatisthematrix.com to advertise The Matrix Resurrections? Why is it that Death Stranding has so many hints at it being a simulation? Why is it that there's a VR training mode that was implemented into the director's cut? Why is it that Kojima has had VR play such a critical role throughout the Metal Gear series, even having the ending of MGS-V be that Venom was training for the Outer Heaven insurrection by playing Metal Gear 1 on an MSX? Why is it that Kojima said that the first Metal Gear Solid was a lot like the first Matrix? Hell, just after Death Stranding's director's cut dropped on PC, after moving offices, he shot the old office on video and stored the 3D data in VR on the metaverse. He also mentioned an information desk in Tokyo Station was unmanned, and he was relieved that it wasn't a robot or AI. As we talked about earlier, the unfettered use of AI in the real world is a slippery slope, and Kojima knows this all too well. Speaking of the director's cut, there's been so many more allusions to VR with it that it's hard to keep track, honestly. The updated poster shows Sam appearing as a chiralgram with light flares that mimic the light flares from MGS-V, with BB floating above his cradled hands for some reason. Then, of course, there's the launch trailer for Death Stranding's director's cut on PC. This trailer says so much throughout it that it's astonishing. It starts out showing a rapid cycling through the quantum equations that are necessary for the chiral network before showing Lou, our BB in the game. Then we see Sam plug into the pod. When we first saw Sam plugging into the BB pod, we had a theory that it was a reference to The Matrix and jacking in. As he plugs into the BB pod, a grid appears and zooms out from Sam, transitioning into what appears to be a hallway of the different environments throughout the game. A hallway. Sound familiar? After this segment, we transition with a grid to the first crater we witnessed in the game, the first cave, and some overhead views of different environments. Then we see a grid view of some mountain terrain, which I argue explicitly implies VR elements. We see more hallway-styled framing shots, followed by a series of clips paired with ominous music. We see Sam in a storm, followed by environments being scanned, which is interestingly reminiscent of Kojima doing 3D scans of the now-moved Kojima Productions office. This leads into shots from the Vietnam cliff fight, which could allude to Kojima Productions turning into much darker subject matter. This idea is further backed up by the shots that precede this, framed with the music to be horror music from the game. All of this leads up to a fourth wall break that reverberates what Kojima told Norman about the player's perspective.
I'm just doing whatever he says, you know, and he's like, we're gonna make people cry. And I'm like, for a video game? And he's like, yep. And I was like, all right. And then he goes, and I go, playing me? And he goes, no, they'll be you. And I was like, I'm just doing whatever he says.
Breaking news, this just in, Kojima's dropped a trailer for...
Let that yawn out. There's no pretending. I will hold you and protect you. So let love warm you till the morning. I'll stay with you by your side. Close your tired eyes and I'll wait. And soon I'll see your smile in a dream. Baby, don't worry. It's okay. I'll always be with you. And don't worry. It's okay.
No one should have to suffer such loss. You know, I meant it when I said I understand how you feel. But if you hold on to the sadness, it'll weigh you down like an anchor.
road and start a new journey.
It wasn't the UCA that made the final decision. It was APAC, a private corporation.
So let love warm you till the morning.
Well?
You know, I made the joke at the beginning that this video would be invalidated in 24 hours because I thought with how much info has been constantly coming out over the last year that it was very likely to happen. If I had published this just before the DS2 trailer launched, this would be pretty hilarious. Because of this new trailer, I added the equivalent of a full-ass chapter in the middle of another chapter because it was relevant to the chapter's focus with the DS-DC trailer just before this. That's Death Stranding Director's Cut. Also, disclaimer, I wrote this segment before watching any analysis of the DS2 trailer. I did, however, collaborate with my Discord group like I've done since at least episode 3 of Kojima's Deception. There's a lot of details, but a lot of it is obvious in terms of the symbolism. By that I mean that between analysis videos / write-ups, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of parallels on the basic stuff. I don't think this trailer alone is a full-on puzzle, but rather a piece of it. However, I wanted to put this in here to give my thoughts that I had after watching the trailer and writing uninfluenced by other creators' thoughts. With that said, the DS2 trailer seems to further emblemize the simulation aspects and makes them much more apparent if you know what you're looking for. First up, we see baby toys littered about the room, which quickly confirms that Lou is safe and sound. Immediately after that, we see a figure that appears to be some form of religious or more likely occult icon resembling Amelie. From another shot, we can see this figure is on the end of a staff being carried by someone in the back of a group of people adorned in red cloaks traversing a desert for a funeral as they're carrying a red casket. In this desert, we have these large obelisk-like structures that are forming an archway of sorts, as well as several pieces that are just floating in the air. Perhaps this archway will facilitate a transformation, so maybe this isn't a funeral at all. While these structures are somewhat reminiscent of the rock formations found in Iceland, which was the biggest geographical influence for the first area of Death Stranding, they're more reminiscent of matter that is spontaneously formed. More on that in a bit. It cuts back, and we're seeing that Fragile has taken on the role of a mother, raising up Lou in a bonding moment. It looks like she's about to set her down, but she notices that something's wrong. We start to see the skylight glitch out, and then the red emergency light activates. At first, she tries to leave up the stairs, then sees the flashlights coming down and decides to use the dumbwaiter to try and avoid whoever broke in. She hops on a one-wheeled motorcycle with Lou strapped to her, only to get shot by the intruder. Fragile crashes. Cut to a figure that's highly reminiscent of Higgs shooting a handgun that's pointed down. Fragile thinks she sees and hears Lou crying, but upon a second glance, sees that she has in fact been shot in the head. She collapses, presumably fainting. Tracking back to the question I posed earlier, will DS2 be the equivalent of a resurrection? In the beginning, we see Lou get executed, but she comes back as nanomachine/chiralium. Of course, Lou was referred to as BB for most of the first game. BB obviously stands for Bridge Baby in Death Stranding, but it also stands for Big Boss in MGS. The irony of MGS-V is that it started with,
"Now go! Let the legend come back to life,"
even though it was the game that represented MGS's death. Considering Kojima's love of MGS, it's possible, but only time will tell. Personally, my bet is on no, this isn't the case, but I've been wrong before. However, as we'll see, this is not the end of BB. Blink cut to the BB pod, and we see what straight up appears to be nanomachines forming a baby. I'm sure there'll be some other explanation, probably, oh, it's a BB as a BT, like Mama's baby, because she created a strong enough bridge between the world of the living and the beach. But that's what I was alluding to earlier when I mentioned spontaneously formed matter. The structures from the start of the trailer look like they're made of nanomachines. If you're unfamiliar, one theory of the AI singularity is called the gray goo theory. To summarize, it's where everything organic and inorganic is consumed and recreated by self-replicating nanomachines, leaving everything to be nothing but nanomachines. At that point, we're back to the question of, how do we know what is real? What would be the difference between a world where everything is nanomachines or a world that's built inside of a computer simulation? Another thing that made me think of nanomachines instead of Lou being a BT is that Lou not only returns to her original form, she seems to be a shapeshifter now and can just become what she wants. At the end of the trailer, we see that the BB pod has an octopus or squid inside. Sam says her name in a questioning tone, which is followed by Lou's laugh, confirming her presence. Also, Kojima posted this gif of Octopus Lou, or Octo Lou, as we'll call her. Maybe this is the only other form she can take on, maybe we'll see other forms down the line. But this is my current hypothesis. I want to follow up this segment and explicitly say that this segment is probably the most speculative regarding lore out of the whole video. As of starting to add in this chapter, it's only been 2 days since the Game Awards. These statements I'm making are thoughts I had based on what I saw, what I've seen before, what I've learned over my years of research, and yes, what I want to happen. I could be dead wrong about the nanomachines. I could be more right than I realize. It has nothing to do with Metal Gear, inextricably connected with the concept of nanomachines as it is. But nanomachines have existed long throughout sci-fi, and there are numerous examples of this. In case you weren't aware, The Matrix also has self-replicating nanomachines as a key element of the lore and plot. I brought it up earlier, how in The Matrix Resurrections, sentient AI that chose to side with humanity would physically manifest as essentially a cloud of nanomachines taking on the shape of a human. However, of course, these nanomachines have existed since long before Resurrections. That is, after all, how the UN blocked out the sun in an attempt to deprive the machines of their energy, inadvertently ensuring the machines' domination over humanity. This is how the machines have continued to self-replicate. They require energy to make it happen, hence using humans as a source of electricity with no other feasible, renewable resource available that could manifest enough energy to power the machines. To further bolster this potential truth, which I'm sure we'll find out more later, is that if we look at the way BTs look when we're standing still, as well as how certain chiral printed objects seem to be manifested from just the light emitting from the disk that gets tossed, the roadways seem to be even more like this in the visuals of it being built. Is it quantum mechanics utilizing the Higgs boson and the Dirac equation? The gray goo theory? All of the above? Or something completely different? But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll do plenty of lore and meta-narrative analysis in the episode covering Death Stranding. So we've got 2 more things to talk about before we wrap up this trailer section. First, Sam and Fragile seem to have switched physical attributes, which is beyond bizarre. It's almost as though Sam absorbed all the timefall that Fragile had been exposed to when Higgs forced her to run with a nuke through timefall with nothing but a mask on. Whether we hear it from their mouths, read it in an email, or see a flashback, it'll certainly be interesting to know what the hell caused this flip-flop of aging. And to wrap it all up, we've got this mysterious, masked, new Higgs, whom for the time being I'm going to call Higgs 2.0. True, he is played by Troy Baker, but it wouldn't be the first time that one actor has played multiple roles in a franchise, certainly not a Hideo Kojima franchise. If you aren't aware, Robert Atkin Downes didn't just play Kazuhira Miller. He also portrayed some of the soldiers in MGS3 and Portable Ops. Similarly, Troy Baker wasn't just portraying middle-aged Ocelot in MGS-V. He also did soldier voice lines in Portable Ops. Definitely curious, and I'll delve into that in a later video. For now, my point is simply that we shouldn't jump to conclusions that Troy is going to play Higgs. Now, to play the devil's advocate, there are some curious things here. Dr. Mogeko von Rue, formerly Sexy Zombie Rue, a member of my Discord community and regular contributor to the channel, pointed out that the robots behind this character for a brief moment all have exclamation points above their heads. Where have I seen that before, Kojima? Ah, right, the series you spent nearly 30 years crafting before the messy breakup with Konami. This new poster Kojima shared, making it explicitly known that their exclamation points, has Higgs 2.0 on the front with 2 exclamation points on the robots behind him. Also, noted by Edward8920 on Twitter, for a split second, the tentacle/snake-esque Odradek, the robot arms Sam and Higgs had in DS1, that Higgs 2.0 is rocking, has a very similar swirl and lines to the Halo of the Sun in Silent Hill Homecoming. As far as other Silent Hill themes, Kojima pointed out that he had the new posters designed to contrast with DS1's posters. Once again, the red and blue motif has returned. In PT, the hallway turns red during the sequence where we're treated to the incredibly unpleasant sounds of Lisa being murdered while the radio eggs on the killer, presumed to be Jack, the protagonist of PT. The upcoming Silent Hill Townfall similarly carries not only the overwhelming red light, but also the black beaches of Normandy and Norway that were the inspiration for The Beach in Death Stranding. Speaking of Townfall obviously having themes reminiscent of Kojima's works, this shot of the portable TV is framed in a way that's rather familiar. In MGS-V, at the very beginning of the game and at the end of the Truth mission, we see Venom walking up to a mirror in a bathroom. Venom's barracks, or maybe an operating theater. I never really thought about what this room was. I figured it was just a bathroom for whatever reason, ignoring all the weaponry piled up in the opening of the game. Just a note, this room is wrapped in plastic. I never noticed that before, but I can't help but tie it in with Twin Peaks.
She's dead. Wrapped in plastic.
Anyway, the framing of the portable TV is very similar to the framing of the cassette player on the shelf below the mirror. Back to Higgs 2.0's design and MGS influences. As Cypher pointed out, the energy this guy is giving off seems to be heavily influenced by Liquid Snake. The mid-length, luscious blonde hair that looks a hell of a lot like Liquid's hair. The big bad 80s anime villain wielding a guitar to intimidate his opponents and quite possibly send commands to his robot backup. It's seemingly all there, wrapped up in a big red Gray Fox/Raiden-esque exoskeleton. After looking more closely, I would say that the design of the exoskeleton is more reminiscent of Raiden's outfit from MGS2 and MGS4 than Gray Fox. However, the color scheme is reminiscent of what I've seen often referred to as the Spider-Man alternate outfit for Gray Fox that you can see in MGS1 on repeat playthroughs after having gotten both the Meryl and Otacon endings. However, unlike the Spider-Man outfit, instead of blue being the contrast color, it's black. This seems rather fitting as Raiden ultimately becomes an echo of Gray Fox's character, acting as a stand-in for Gray Fox's pathos. To demonstrate this, we're going to cover Gray Fox's life, as well as Raiden's in order to see the dualities of them. This information is summarized from the Metal Gear Fan Wiki. Gray Fox was a child soldier, fighting with the Frelimo guerrillas in the Mozambican War of Independence. He was known for his cruel tactics, tricking enemies into letting their guard down before killing them. He gained the name Frank Jaeger on the battlefield with these tactics. As a teenager, he became a part of the Fox unit, given the codename Null. Frank was tormented by their barrage of experiments, erasing his mind and being programmed to kill specific targets. In 1979, During the Rhodesian Civil War, Frank was responsible for killing Naomi Hunter's parents. Feeling immense guilt after finding her on the brink of starvation, he gave her his rations and adopted her, caring for her as a younger sister. Sometime later on, he would join the U.S. Special Forces unit Foxhound. Yeager was the only member to receive the unit's highest commendation and was given the codename Fox. However, during his initial mission to stop the Outer Heaven uprising, Fox was captured and would then be rescued by Snake. Afterwards, Fox followed Big Boss and helped build Zanzibar Land, becoming his most trusted lieutenant. During the Zanzibar Land disturbance, Snake would be forced to fight Gray Fox to the death, triumphing with a decisive blow onto a landmine that blew Gray Fox to bits. The Patriots secretly recovered his remains and jammed him into an exoskeleton. Dr. Clark, aka Paramedic, would go on to perform extensive invasive experiments, subjecting him to drugs, gene therapy, and using nanomachines to suppress his emotions. That technology would later be used by the SOP system in MGS4. Of course, the rest is history. He kills Dr. Clark, breaks out, and makes his way to Shadow Moses Island. When he gets there, he calls Snake to warn him about claymores hidden around where Snake fights Vulcan Raven, calling himself Deep Throat, which was the same pseudonym used during the Watergate scandal. Later, he has a face-off with Snake, and then is killed by Liquid when he fights alongside Snake in an attempt to stop Liquid. Liquid crushed him under the foot of Metal Gear Rex. Raiden had a very similar upbringing and adult life. Jack was born in Liberia and was adopted by Solidus Snake during the First Liberian Civil War after Solidus orphaned Jack. He was raised as a child soldier, trained to be a ruthless killer by Solidus. As part of the small boy unit, Raiden was fed food that had gunpowder mixed in due to the hallucinogenic effects of toluene, making them more controllable. This made them more susceptible to brainwashing, and they were shown war movies as a form of image training. Jack became a killing machine, known as the White Devil and Jack the Ripper, because of his significantly higher kill rate by comparison to the other boys, as well as his penchant for bladed weapons. After the war, he was put into a relief center by Solidus. Eventually, a non-governmental organization rescued Jack and other surviving members of the small boy unit, giving them the needed therapy to move on from their past. While the others were able to accept the past and move on, Jack could not accept his past and hated it. Jack grew to suppress his memories, burying them in his nightmares. Because of this, the Patriots chose to implant a high concentration of nanomachines in his cerebral cortex in order to have him function as a backup system for an optic neuro AI. These same nanomachines were also capable of memory manipulation by connecting or stimulating synapses. Eventually, he joined the US military where he was recognized by the Army's Force 21 trials, where he participated in over 300 VR missions, which included recreations of the Shadow Moses incident and the Tanker incident. Sometime between meeting Rosemary and the start of the Big Shell incident, Jack was recruited into a supposedly reformed Foxhound, a special forces unit that no longer officially existed. Near the end of the Big Shell incident, two very key things happened. The kernel AI started to become corrupted after being injected with a worm cluster that was eating away at its code, making it highly unstable and removing its filter that prevented it from divulging the true nature of his mission, and that he was, in fact, an AI manifested from Raiden's image of Colonel Campbell from doing the Shadow Moses VR training. The other is that Raiden was informed that Olga Gurlukovich, thought to be an enemy, was being manipulated by the Patriots by keeping her daughter as a hostage in order to make sure Raiden completed his mission and stayed alive. If Raiden died, they would kill Olga's daughter. After taking down Solidus, Jack and Rose would go on to live together, though it didn't last long. His memories of being a child soldier started to resurface, causing tension in their relationship. He began drinking heavily, starting fights, and eventually left her, believing that she had a miscarriage. Raiden would later learn from Big Mama, in exchange for the location of Big Boss, that Sunny, Olga's daughter, was being held in Area 51. He would then rescue Sunny with the help of the Paradise Lost Army. While attempting to retrieve the remains of Big Boss from the Patriots, Raiden was captured. While in captivity, the Patriots turned him into a cyborg. With the help of the Paradise Lost Army, Raiden managed to escape his captivity. After undergoing surgery to remove the nanomachines from his body, he was able to successfully retrieve Big Boss's remains. During the Guns of the Patriots incident, Raiden would reveal himself to Snake by codec in the same way that Gray Fox did back in the Shadow Moses incident, by calling himself Deep Throat. Sometime later, after assisting Snake in stopping Liquid, Liquid takes control of an arsenal gear that he calls Outer Haven and crashes it into the dock where Snake is kneeling, accepting his long-awaited death. However, Raiden shows up to save Snake, holding off the ship from hitting Snake long enough for Snake to escape. However, Raiden is crushed under the weight of Outer Haven, very similarly to how Gray Fox was crushed under the foot of Metal Gear Rex. He is presumed to be dead at first, but survived. His body recovered following Outer Haven's departure. The point of explaining the duality between these two was to show that the design of Higgs 2.0 is simultaneously a reference to both Gray Fox and Raiden, as they both hold the same purpose of a damaged victim of the military-industrial complex who eventually became cyborgs. In this case, Higgs can be seen as a victim of the governmental industrial complex. Now here's where things get a bit weird. The hair isn't just reminiscent of Liquid, it's also reminiscent of Amelie. I can't help but compare this to The Matrix again. I'm imagining a similar situation to Agent Smith's ability to assimilate anyone he chooses. With Amelie seemingly left on her personal beach, isolated from the world, it wouldn't take much of a leap to consider that he could access her beach through the fake bridge baby she gave to him. After all, just like Sam being found on his own beach through the revolver, the fake BB would act as a totem of connection between them. On top of that, he's wearing a Kipu, and not just any Kipu, it's definitely Amelie's Kipu, as you can see in this comparison. I'm not saying this definitively confirms that this is Higgs, but if it's not, I'd be surprised. So this is starting to feel like deja vu with history repeating itself. A deja vu is when something has been changed in the Matrix. Let's look at this on a larger scale for a moment and examine the plot. We'll be focusing on Liquid's feud with Solid Snake and skipping past the events of MGS-V for various reasons, namely that they're not particularly relevant to this discussion right now. Trust me, we'll get there in a few videos. In Metal Gear Solid, Big Boss has 3 living clones made from his DNA while he's in a coma before the events of Peace Walker. Solid, Solidus, and Liquid. Liquid grew to resent his brother because he believed that Solid Snake had the dominant genes from Big Boss, when it's revealed that Liquid had the dominant genes all along. He then incited the Shadow Moses incident where he takes over with an army of Genome soldiers as well as members of Foxhound, a top secret op Solid Snake was previously a part of, all in the name of making his father's vision a reality. Outer Heaven. This pulled Solid Snake out of retirement to handle the situation. Ultimately, Solid Snake defeats him in a drawn-out conflict that goes from mech to kickboxing on top of it to a car chase, ending with Liquid dying from his heart being stopped by the FoxDie virus. Death Stranding is quite similar. Higgs and Sam both have a direct connection to Amelie, who could be seen as a conduit for the role of Big Boss and Joy. Similar to both, practically nothing is known about their lives before their adulthood. All we know about Amelie is that her Ha and Ka separated during an operation on the cancer that developed in her uterus. All we know about Big Boss is that he was a soldier in the Korean War, then went on to train and develop CQC with Joy. All we know about Joy is that she's the daughter of one of the founders of the Wise Men's Committee and would be raised by the philosophers, resulting in a life of war, espionage, and false disgrace. Okay, there's a little bit more info than that, but the point is that their pasts are all murky or completely unknown in their respective lore. Now, stay with me. We're going to bring this back around to Higgs and Sam. I'm going to be pulling a lot of this information from the Death Stranding wiki, as they do a good job of summing up the events told in the mail and interviews. Higgs, to say the least, had a rocky life. Both of his parents died, and he was raised by his abusive uncle, who would beat him if he dared to ask about the outside world or attempted to leave the shelter. Then, he killed his uncle in self-defense and had to dispose of the body before it caused a void out. To survive, he became a porter. He discovered he had dooms after feeling BTs reacting to a corpse of a prepper he was attempting to dispose of, after he discovered him dead upon delivering his cargo. Afterward, he was recruited by Fragile's mother, Coffin, as a member of a rebel/terrorist organization. It's a situation of the cause was just, but the means to the end were not, as it was in response to the UCA's inhumane experiments to produce BBs. However, the group was disbanded when they attacked a UCA facility that was then detonated by the UCA themselves in retaliation, killing almost all the rebels. Leaving that life behind, he went on to join Fragile Express with a plan to outdo the UCA in their plan to bring everyone together in a free, united world. Then he met Amelie and became her herald, believing only she could unite America. Then she confessed to Higgs that she was the extinction entity, and that she planned to bring about the last stranding earlier than fate had intended. She gave him a fake BB, giving him the ability to travel to and from the beach, effectively making him a repatriate like Sam. Sam also had a tumultuous life. He was experimented on as one of the original BBs, taken under false terms from his father, and was shot in the stomach, dying and entering the beach. Amelie didn't want him to die, so she healed his wounds and brought him back to life. This is what gave Sam his repatriate powers, as we know. But what many don't know is what happened between his childhood and the events of Death Stranding. Obviously, we know that at some point before we met him, he had already joined up with Bridges before, part of the Expedition 1 team. He would meet a psychotherapist named Lucy who tried to help rid him of his aphanphosmphobia. They fell in love, got married, and eventually had a daughter who would be named Lou. However, because of Sam's dooms, Lucy bearing his child would be subjected to the horrible nightmares of doom sufferers. She committed suicide, taking her daughter and the satellite town of UCA 010C with her from the resulting void out. As a repatriate, able to come back from the beach, Sam was alone. Due to public pressure and guilt, he left Bridges and became a freelance porter, isolating himself. He would continue freelancing for a decade before we met up with him for the first time, leading up to Centralknot being wiped out by a void out. Let's go ahead and boil this down. Sam is a hardworking member of Bridges on account of being the adoptive brother of the president of the UCA, putting him in the right place at the right time. His wife dies and he goes into solitude after public pressure, becoming a freelancer, only to then be pulled back into working for Bridges despite his grievances. Throughout his journey to reconnect America, Sam has to fight his father repeatedly. After preventing, or more accurately postponing, the extinction event, Sam goes into hiding after saving BB from incineration. Then we find him at the start of this trailer, with BB still being an infant, and Sam is a seemingly old man, implying rapid aging from timefall. This is almost one-to-one comparing it to Solid Snake's life, a few caveats withstanding, of course. Snake was a member of the US Army's Green Berets, which led him to become a member of Foxhound. Despite thwarting Big Boss's plan for Outer Heaven, and being part of one of the most prestigious groups to exist in the US military, he would become a mercenary for hire. Afterward, he experienced PTSD caused by memories of killing Big Boss, Snake's father, whom he got his DNA from, which led to him isolating himself from society, living in Alaska as a sled dog driver. After being pulled out of retirement, Snake did one more mission for the US government to thwart Liquid's plans to create a new outer heaven, then going back to being a gun for hire, though with more philanthropic goals.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Thank you. You won't see another episode of this for at least 3 to 9 months.
But guess what? I will be coming back, and I'm bringing my new toys with me.
Fast forward to MGS4, only 5 years after the events of MGS2, and Solid Snake is now Old Snake due to rapid aging from being a clone. Now the question is, will Sam follow the same fate, continuing his work for the UCA well beyond when his body should? So now that the Sam/Snake comparison is done, Liquid and Higgs are up on the chopping block for gross oversimplification in the name of confirmation bias. Higgs was a porter with a messy and sad history who was converted into a terrorist cell for a cause he viewed as just. After that fell apart, he went back to being a porter for a time, until he met Amelie and was seduced by her powers. Agreeing with her plan to expedite the last stranding, he served under her dutifully. When he wasn't satisfied waiting for her to make this a reality, he took matters into his own hands and formed a new terrorist cell known as Homo Demens, the very antithesis of Homo Ludens. His rivalry with Sam didn't start until he felt that Amelie was becoming obsessed with Sam, her adoptive brother, at least as far as we know. Despite being called brother, you could compare their relationship more to that of a mother and son. Jealous of this, Higgs would target Sam as his nemesis. Their conflict seemingly came to an end with a fight on the beach, where it was presumed that Fragile landed the killing strike. Compare this to Liquid, who as a child led a group of child soldiers in Africa. He went on to become a soldier for the British Special Air Service up until he was taken as a POW by the Iraqis, declared MIA. It wasn't until 1994 that he was saved by the US government. After Solid Snake toppled Big Boss's plan, Liquid's hatred and envy for Snake grew as he was denied his revenge for being pinned as the inferior clone. In 2005, Liquid was convinced by Ocelot to lead an insurrection against the US, leading him to radicalize various members of Foxhound and threatening to launch a nuke on a major US population. The timeline is off a bit between their respective lives, and certain life experiences are essentially inverted, but I think you can probably see how history is repeating itself. So everything after the disclaimer and before this sentence was written before watching any other analyses. I did want to say, after watching Python and Selkin's deep dive on the trailer, you should definitely go watch it if you haven't. If you've got 45 minutes, a lot of what they said fills in the gaps of my speculation, like Sam's biological age after being on the beach for an undefined period of time, and Fragile possibly being beached, etc. If you want a good video to give even more emphasis to the theme of history repeating itself, and how much better some of their stuff fits in with that theme, check out their video. It's an excellent watch, and proof that when they make a full-blown theory vid, they just about never miss with the quality and effort. And now, back to your regularly scheduled program. Chapter 5-2, Electric Boogaloo.
What? How the hell did that happen? Cooper flew the coop.
Because of how far back my last video covering Hideo was, I didn't get to cover this fact in a video yet, but I think it's potentially important. Death Stranding Director's Cut originally came out on September 24th, 2021. Kojima was also supposed to revitalize Silent Hill as a franchise with Silent Hills, of which PT was a playable teaser for. Did you know that Silent Hill 2, considered by many to be the best game in the series for its story, was released in the US on September 24th, 2001, I doubt it was an accident that the director's cut of Death Stranding came out on the 20th anniversary of Silent Hill 2, especially considering the recent Silent Hill 2 remake. Relatively recently, we've seen leaks about Silent Hill which promptly got copyright claimed off of Twitter, followed by leaks for one of Kojima Productions' projects, only being referred to as Overdose. This game Overdose has a logo featuring the famous triangle formation of 3 circles known to correlate to the order in Silent Hill. The core of the insignia, known as the Halo of the Sun. This was Kojima's first hint in-game of PT that it was a Silent Hill experience before the ending, which explicitly revealed this fact to be true. Several others made the same connection, but I thought I should share this to make this video comprehensive. For years now, we've had non-stop rumors about a new Silent Hill being in development. Some said that there were multiple in development. As I mentioned, as Kojima was heavily influenced by the works of David Lynch, their creative style can be compared quite closely. With this said, it could be that these leaks, along with the actions that have happened online over the past several years, could be altering the nature of whatever Kojima's working on. Out of all these rumors and leaks, the most plausible evidence we currently have leads us to the following conclusions, but keep in mind this is all subject to change. 1. Kojima is working on a horror game. This was basically confirmed back when he was given a BAFTA fellowship, their highest honor. During the interview, he told them the following: PT ended as just an experiment, but I would like to make another horror game someday. Something that uses a revolutionary method to create terror, that doesn't just make you pee your pants, but crap them. I already have ideas in mind.
One franchise I love the art direction in, Silent Hill. I hope we get a new one of those.
2. This horror game is either directly a Silent Hill game, or is a spiritual successor to Silent Hills. Unless, of course, this tweet is to be taken at face value, and that Death Stranding itself is Silent Hills. And honestly, I can see this being the case. An official, unofficial Silent Hill game that focuses on the experience of being absorbed into vast landscapes, with some truly fucked up cosmic horror going on with regards to humanity flying too close to the sun through scientific endeavors. And furthermore, the implications of what little we currently know about quantum mechanics and how it shapes our reality. 3. The leaked images of the in-progress Silent Hill game signed by Masahiro Ito with the cherry blossom sticky note creature could very well end up being part of Overdose. Again, all of this is subject to change, and these are my speculations of what could be. Chapter 6. The Digital Society. I'm leaving this segment for posterity to show how little info we had and how that can be interpreted in a way that is incorrect yet feasible at the time. If you're new to this, it might be beneficial to see this. If you're a fellow Kojima aficionado, it's a good reminder that incorrect predictions and interpretations of vague information from the media can be interesting upon revisiting. Otherwise, if you're not interested in that, go ahead and skip to the conclusion and stick around for the surprise at the end. Ever since Dusk Golem, the now former leaker, said that the original statement about 2 Silent Hill projects evolved into 3.5 Silent Hill games in development, there has been speculation everywhere. Recently, however, before the Silent Hill stream happened, we were learning a lot about this, almost exclusively through leaks it seems. I'm beginning to wonder if the Silent Hill leaks are purely circumstantial, or if they're planted like what Valve does a lot of the times these days. Considering how careful Kojima is about leaks, if he's involved in any capacity, it would be devastating for these many leaks to be coming out if it wasn't intentional. However, considering the Silent Hill transmission has happened at this point, the leaks are less important than what we have now. Based on what Christoph said in his interview before the stream, this movie he's working on is apparently likely to be tied in with the new line of games. However, with that said, With what he said during the stream, as well as some of the storyboards shown during his segment, Silent Hill 2's story is going to play a heavy role in it. It might branch outside of that, but only time will tell. He also confirmed in the stream that he's working with key members of Team Silent in order to make this movie as good and respectful to the source material as he can. This seems like a somewhat indirect statement referring to the original Silent Hill movie, featuring Pyramid Head despite the fact that he was designed for James as his reflection. This interweaving of Silent Hill media is especially curious given Kojima's statement.
Things such as games and music and novels and movies and all of these things will kind of mesh together into one type of entertainment.
Echoing his directorial mantra, "My body is 70% movies," which he translates into the medium of games. Gans confirmed that Silent Hill 2 is in fact getting a remake from Bloober Team, and he mentioned Kojima with no prompting. This might have been to dispel rumors, but it also might have been another real leak. Just before Gans' leak, we had a leak from the South Korean government, no less, for a Silent Hill game called Silent Hill Short Message. As has been reported, this is through their video game rating board, like PEGI or the ESRB. This likely means that this entry, Short Message, a title that alludes to a similar scenario as PT, could in fact be the half-game Dusk Golem was referring to. It also means that it's probably ready to drop, since rating boards such as this don't greenlight something if it's not ready to be published as it is. There has been a new development. As of December 30th, 2022, the Taiwanese rating board basically spoiled the plot through their rating, and in the listing, there is no reference to Kojima Productions. The rest of this Short Message speculation segment was written before this news came out, but I'm keeping it as is because it's mostly dealing with what the short message will be about. Even though it would appear that Kojima is not directly involved, he could be involved on an advisory level if he has anything to do with Silent Hill at this point, helping make sure all the threads connect between the different projects. The Overdose leaked footage is inconclusive, looking like it could fit either in Silent Hill, its own thing entirely, or it could be a fake-out for something dealing with Death Stranding 2. After all the rewrites I've done on this script, I'm not going to rewrite the whole chapter here because of this development. No turning back now. I'm not going to delve too much into speculating about what the half game is, but based on the screenshots from the 2020 build that leaked, it could be that it could have to do with the SMS messages ARG factor that has been discussed with regards to Kojima's plans for Silent Hills before its cancellation.
I was basically told that Silent Hills would kind of interact with you in the real world. Of course, through development, all of these things could change. They could have scrapped this idea entirely because it's very complicated. I'm also not 100% confident in my source, and I did say that when I tweeted anything about this, but some outlets decided to run with it anyway. It's not that that source doesn't have that information, it's that I suspect that that source has lied about a few things to seem like an interesting person, which is a whole other thing. So basically, it was that you would have to sign a disclosure, an agreement, when even beginning to play the game, which, some games do anyway. They make you accept something before you're actually able to play the game. But with Silent Hill specifically, it was because it would interact with you outside of the game, even when you weren't actually playing the game. It would do things like potentially send you text messages, send you emails. There was an idea that was floated that I'm not sure how solidified it was, that for anyone who has smart lighting, if you paired it basically with certain apps, that it might be able to flick your lights in different colors or play with your lighting while you were playing the game to add extra atmosphere, which I absolutely love the idea of happening anyway. I would love it if games would do that. But that maybe it would look like you were getting some kind of anonymous contact from a character within Silent Hills through emails, through text messages, through potentially even social media. They would have conversations with you or potentially just threaten you in strange ways. It also could have just been an idea that was floated by Kojima, which is the part that I think does make the most sense to me. I can see Kojima wanting to pursue this kind of multimedia experience where you're playing Silent Hills and also being haunted by Silent Hills when you're not playing the game. That does seem like something that he would pitch or want to do. Whether Konami would let him or not, or be able to or not, is a whole other thing, but that was supposedly the idea was floated. There were some conversations about things like deleting or playing with save data, or maybe even changing the way that your PS5 like background looks, like just really like creating a bunch of glitches on the console that weren't really there while you were playing the game. But that's not something that hasn't been done before. Has actually been done quite a number of times, but I don't believe it's ever happened successfully on console, which is a whole other thing. But yeah, I wanted to highlight this article particularly from Games Radar. This one is from March 13, that says the Silent Hills revival is reportedly is not yet a done deal, but would afford Kojima full creative freedom and potentially make use of Sony's next-gen PlayStation VR headset. Again, that would be super cool if you could have this game running in VR. Kojima gets full creative control, so he's allowed to do whatever multimedia stuff he wants to do. And then you get a phone call, and you have to take the VR headset off and you answer it, and it's the voice of someone in the game or something. That would be so cool. Additionally, it sounds like Sony pitched Kojima the Silent Hills revival as a narrative-driven experience akin to Until Dawn and Telltale's The Walking Dead series. Both sources are reporting that Sony is acting as a sort of mediator between Hideo Kojima and Konami in an effort to revive Silent Hills on PS5. It would be a very good idea for them to have Silent Hills around the launch of that console. I feel like that would be a really strong thing to have. Obviously, they're going to want to work with Kojima regardless with Kojima Productions. Whether Kojima wants to go back to work with Konami instead of having the ability to make whatever he wants with his new studio is a different conversation.
As Norman Reedus said in an interview, Death Stranding has elements of social media. While texting isn't necessarily social media, it is just as common, if not more common these days, for people to use social media DMs to communicate instead of using SMS. Now, in the case of Death Stranding, some of the elements of social media Norman referred to were the like system and the way that acts as a social currency. Aside from this, some of the other platforms of social media were more literal to the real world, with Kojima providing hints galore on Twitter and Instagram about what Death Stranding would be about. Speaking of Instagram and other filter-enabled social media apps, Dusk Golem apparently liked a response to his tweet about the sticky notes, alluding that the plot had to do with how social media warps our perception of ourselves and the world at large. I probably shouldn't say this, but I kinda want to, so I am. A lot of people have been ragging on the I hate myself image from the Silent Hill pics, which definitely wasn't ever meant to be seen by the public. But if you really think about it, do all the sticky notes around the place seem like things she's manifesting for herself, or things others have directed at her that color how other people see her? That's what I'll choose to say. The response that Dusk liked was from a user named The Ripper, a mod on r/Kojimbox. And it was simply a link to an article about Snapchat dysmorphia. To boil it down in a sentence, Snapchat dysmorphia is a form of body dysmorphia where image filters, commonly associated with Snapchat and Instagram, are the lead contributor for this specific kind of dysmorphia due to the way it visually distorts the image of the user if they choose to use a filter. After spending enough time obsessing over looking perfect and using an app that distorts your self-image, the image you see in the camera will eventually take over as what you think you should look like. As Dusk Golem stated, it's pretty clear that the image of the protagonist with the Jared Leto Joker "I hate myself" on her forehead wasn't supposed to be public. It was likely made solely for a pitch to get approval and/or financial backing. If this is indeed Kojima's game, this would make sense. You wouldn't advertise with something so kludgy, but you would make a mock-up that gets a complex idea across in a simplified manner for a pitch meeting. What we know for sure is that there are multiple Silent Hill projects in development. 3.5 games. Silent Hill 2 Remake, Silent Hill F, Silent Hill Townfall, as well as a movie being made by the original movie's director, and Ascension. The question many have been asking is Kojima involved? Maybe. Then there's the leak from Tom Henderson in his article about Kojima's Overdose. The article reads as such. The creative mind behind the likes of Metal Gear Solid and Death Stranding is working on a new title currently named Overdose. Early footage that has been sent to me under the request of anonymity seems to show Mama from Death Stranding wearing a blue dress. The game, however, does not appear to be Death Stranding 2 and just features the actress who portrayed Mama, Margaret Qualley. Footage shows the character walking through dark corridors with a flashlight in third person, but it's been suggested that the game can be played in first person too. A jump scare at the end of the footage shows Game Over, followed by a Hideo Kojima game, Overdose. It's been rumored by reputable insider Jeff Grubb that Kojima has been in talks with Xbox for the company to publish their next game. Although I wasn't able to verify that this deal has been finalized, it does seem that something is likely to be announced soon. After all, a picture did surface last week of Hideo Kojima in a Zoom call with the creator of the Summer Games Fest, Jeff Keighley. Whatever the game turns out to be, it does appear to be the horror game that has previously been rumored. So fingers crossed that we get a glimpse of the game this week at either Summer Games Fest or the Xbox and Bethesda Showcase. Update: Kojima Productions have since asked for the publication of this report to be removed, which we have declined. Obviously at this point, it hasn't been publicly revealed, but it has been leaked as you might have been seeing, should I not have to remove it and re-upload because of a copyright claim. Konami copyright claiming those tweets from Dusk Golem, as well as Kojima Productions allegedly asking Tom Henderson to remove his article about Overdose. Some connections could pretty easily be made without too much imagination. It's quite possible that for earlier development of Overdose, Kojima was using a stand-in actress for Margaret Qualley. This can be explained by saving costs, but having someone play the role of a lookalike model for Kojima to get a mood of the game. Additionally, it would create something of a smokescreen, because while she's something of a lookalike, that's pretty clearly not Margaret Qualley in the pictures from the leak, as well as this mocap artist from this pic Kojima posted. It could be that this photo was from making the 2020 build of this leaked Silent Hill game. Keep in mind the disclaimer I gave about this segment though. If he's involved, it's likely just on an advisory level. At one point, Dusk came out saying, "The Silent Hill community is so in doubt that anything's actually happening, that many are even taking official word, like the new Silent Hill movie from the official film's director from the horse's mouth itself, with such a grain of salt, it's almost funny and sad." Generally, I think the Silent Hill fanbase is a bit overtly dramatic and pessimistic. You can sorta get it, but they push it to this extreme. And then honestly, I think the worst mainline Silent Hill game wasn't even that bad. Homecoming was okay. But many treat it like it's a sin on its earth. So I think there's something of a self-feeding delusion going on in that fanbase. That's simultaneously somewhat understandable, but also 100% self-made. That kinda just makes the level of self-doubt and hatred for anything new almost to comical levels. He followed this up with another string of tweets saying, "Just for one clarification, I'm not saying this into rumor stuff, from me or anyone else. I can 100% understand doubting that. While I can give my word what I've said about the Silent Hill games is 100% true, and the screens I shared were from Silent Hill, ultimately time will prove or disprove that for most people, and I get that. But I'm talking about just in full-on denial of anything and everything. Actual people who've worked on the series actually saying they're working on a Silent Hill film that they think will release in 2023, somehow taking that as a rumor, even though it's being explicitly stated by the person in question. Then just the unacceptance, to not even give anything new the slightest bit of a chance, based on nothing but pessimism. It's not just my formerly ruse-based analyses that made this comparison between Death Stranding and what we can only theorize were Kojima's ambitions for Silent Hills. Even well-known and respected figures in the Silent Hill community were making these same comparisons. Max Durrott made a video about a secret connection between Death Stranding and Silent Hill. In his video that he made at the end of the month of Death Stranding's initial release back in November of 2019, allowing time for him to finish the game, Max made several comparisons with Silent Hill and Death Stranding, and how their narratives and worlds are structured. I think it's interesting to note how Max and I differ in our perspectives. He makes these comparisons in a hypothetical truth of the collective unconscious theorized by Carl Jung, and I'm making comparisons with theoretical, still not fully determined truths in the realm of quantum mechanics, where it feels like we haven't even scratched the surface. I think it's quite likely that Kojima used aspects of both Jungian psychology and quantum mechanics when developing the story and world of Death Stranding, much like David Lynch. As I mentioned in the last chapter, David Lynch believes that the collective unconscious and the unified field are one and the same. The collective unconscious is one of Carl Jung's concepts, where the unified field is considered to be the holy grail of quantum mechanics, and with such knowledge, would grant us truly unknowable power. Now, I know I've shared a few points of speculative potential outcomes, but you might be wondering, with all of what I just said, what are Konami and Kojima really up to? Maybe there's some business agreement that they've come to. Maybe that was set up in advance. Maybe it was something Kojima was counting on happening. Maybe he's had a long con plan for his longtime fans to get some enjoyment and speculation. What I do know is that Kojima's busy working on something, not just DS2. It looks like it's horror, and it could either be a spiritual or direct successor to what PT got people excited for. Whatever else it is he's working on, I look forward to hearing more about it when they get around to officially announcing and showing their other projects. Until then, there's more to learn about the Snaketrix. Next time, we'll go further down the rabbit hole and start dissecting how Kojima's games tie into this meta-narrative on a case-by-case basis.
The hungry purple dinosaur ate the kind zingy fox, the jabbering crab, and the mad whale and started bending and quacking.
The hungry purple dinosaur ate the kind zingy fox, the jabbering crab, and the mad whale and started bending and quacking.
The hungry purple dinosaurs ate the kind zingy fox, the jabbering crab, and the mad whale, and started bending and quacking.
Luden's Report is a partner show to Enter the Snaketrix, kind of a combination of what the Ruse News and the Side Ops were for Kojima's Deception. Luden's Report will be where the majority of my speculation will be done, as it is discussing developing stories and products that have yet to be released. It's not necessary for enjoying and absorbing Enter the Snaketrix, but it will add onto it for those that want to keep up with it. Luden's Report will have longer form episodes as well as shorter episodes, depending on how much I need to cover. In the case of episode 1, it's going to be pretty long. To give an idea, the script for this episode of Enter the Snaketrix was 40 pages long, and the first episode of Luden's Report is 32 pages. In the original upload of this back in 2022, in the outro, I mentioned the idea of opening a public Discord server. The video didn't get much traction, mainly because the intro hook sucked, so nothing ever came of it at the time. But I've gone ahead and made the server, and I'm sharing it here now. Currently it's just me, but I'm hoping by the time the first Luden's Report is released, there will be a decent crowd to hang with and chat about theories, Kojima, Konami, movies, and whatever else sounds good. Also, I want to give a huge shout out to Game Largo. I watched his videos after the premiere of this video a few years back, and I really like his work. If you want more analysis, go check his work out. There's some mention of the ruse, but he's simply referring to the metagame of Kojima's works, not the idea of the Konami being a false story. Thank you for watching to this point. If you want to see more of my work, check out my channel. My other main series is Movies That Don't Suck, though so far there's only 4 episodes of that. I have a 5th in the making, but I can't promise when that'll be done because it's a very serious and personal video. Anyway guys, until next time, this is Dead Gone Wrong, over and out.